Hey everybody, it's Dustin here, and it's been nearly 7 years since the launch of PlayStation 4. It's hard to believe, honestly, at this point. It's strange because it feels like yesterday and a million years ago at the same time. This console launch was special for me though, because it was the first one that I was a real adult for. Thus, I was able to be as irresponsible as I saw fit. So that included buying a console at launch along with more than a few games. Maybe even a few games that I normally wouldn't buy, but damn, my excitement for PS4 was very high. Did I pay for some of it with my borrowed college living fund? I can't confirm that, but I will say I may have opted for more than a few ramen meals after November 2013. Launch games are a bit of a tricky subject if you ask me. Some people look at them as the end-all be-all, declaring there must be enough games worth buying at launch to justify the purchase of the console. On the other hand, we've seen consoles with practically one major game worth playing at launch, and everyone bought it anyway. As far as PlayStation is concerned, the consensus overall is launch lineups haven't been so great. Looking back at the lists, there's very few standout titles as far as quality. Sure, there was Rayman on PlayStation 1, but it's not exactly a game that screamed next-generation 3D graphics at the time. Then on PlayStation 2, there were a few games here and there like SSX and Time Splitters, but again, nothing that really screams that you need to buy this console right now. PlayStation 3, not much better. Again, a few titles like Resistance Fall of Man and Tony Hawk Project 8, maybe? It's funny because I remember when the PS3 came out initially feeling upset that I couldn't afford one at the $5.99 price point, but once I saw the games, I felt some relief because there wasn't even any games I wanted to play on it. So that leaves us with PlayStation 4 and the core of this video. How does the launch lineup of PlayStation 4 compare to the PlayStation 5? Now, to be fair, this can't be a true comparison, as we haven't played the games on PS5 yet, but it is still fun to go back and at least compare some of the lists of titles. Let's start off with retail games. There were 14 in total that you could buy on disc day one. And specifically, I'm looking at disc-specific games for the most part because back in 2013, that's the primary way that most of us still played our games. So let's go through the list. First of all, Angry Birds Star Wars. This was literally a phone game that they ported to consoles and charged $50 for. No thank you, let's move on. Assassin's Creed Black Flag. This was a cross-gen game that, while it did look better running on PlayStation 4, it wasn't a game changer in the graphics department. Overall though, this game is considered a fan favorite of the Assassin's Creed franchise. Alright, so Battlefield 4. This was also a cross-gen game, but with a much bigger next-gen upgrade. The PS4 version looked so much better and ran at a much higher frame rate. Unfortunately though, this game was plagued with a ton of online issues that would take months to fix. Call of Duty Ghosts, we all know and remembered as one of the worst Call of Duty games according to most fans of the franchise, and a fall from grace for developer Infinity Ward. To be honest though, I have little experience with this game, but I know that people weren't impressed on multiple levels, including the bland next-gen graphics. Injustice Gods Among Us Ultimate Edition was an up-resed version of the last-gen game that included the DLC. Nothing too exciting. Just Dance 2014 was just another Just Dance game, I guess? LEGO Marvel Superheroes was, yet again, another cross-gen game with some minor PS4 updates, and Need for Speed was in the same boat. That leaves us now with the first two major first-party launch games, Killzone Shadowfall and Knack. Shadowfall was the first follow-up to the Killzone trilogy on PlayStation 3, and the major thing that stuck out to me about this title was the graphics. This was the first game I booted up when I got home with my new console, and I was really impressed. The opening scene in the helicopter was just as good as the E3 trailer, and that's something Guerrilla has had issues with in the past. Was the game good though? That's debatable. The game was a mixed bag with critics, scoring a total of 73 on Metacritic, with the critics mostly being split on positive and mixed. Regardless, it was an exciting release since it set a really high benchmark of what was possible on the new system. Alright, so let's talk about Knack real quick. This game didn't fare well critically either, but it was at a much lower 54. To me, Knack is simply a game that was used to check off a box of having a family-friendly game at the launch of the system. Could it have been better? Sure, but it served its purpose, and I'm sure that despite it not being on par with other games in its category, I bet there were tons of kids that played this game and had a great time. Maybe even adults too. So that leaves us with the sports games: FIFA 14, Madden NFL 25, NBA Live 14, and NBA 2K14. Sports games are a standard with new console launches, and I'm sure they not only sell copies like crazy, but systems, since there are a ton of gamers out there that play sports games almost exclusively. 14 games total on store shelves. Not a bad list by any means, but it's not incredible either. To me, there's tons of good and maybe even great games on the list, but nothing that screams, buy a PS4 right now. Arguably, the best games on the list are Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Battlefield 4, and maybe Killzone. But two of those are technically last-gen games, and Battlefield 4 didn't even work at launch. So despite the mixed retail games, there were a few download games available at launch on day one. Games like Super Motherload and Trine 2 were some smaller titles, but the most impressive digital game to me at launch was Resogun from Housemarque. This was offered as a free PS Plus game along with Contrast. Resogun was and still is to this day a fantastic game on the PlayStation 4. It received numerous updates, and it even got support for PlayStation 4 Pro. Definitely one of the standout games at launch, and one of the games I still recommend you go check out right now. Fast forward to 2020, it's been 7 years and things have changed quite a bit. Both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X are coming out in one of the most abnormal years in world history. And with that comes a bit of an abnormal launch if you take a closer look. Plus, the entire way we buy and play games has changed drastically. Digital is becoming the more prevalent way of buying games, and subscription services are also on the rise. To top all that off, the lines between current gen and next gen games are starting to feel a bit hazy. Cross-gen games have always been a thing, but now we're seeing more and more titles offer next-gen upgrades. For example, games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Cyberpunk 2077 will offer next-gen upgrades if you buy them on PS4 or Xbox One. Not only that, there are many current-gen games that have been out for a while that are moving over to the next generation. Games like Destiny 2, Avengers, and even something as far back as Witcher 3 have been confirmed to be getting free next-gen upgrades as well. Not every upgrade though is going to be free, and that's where things start to get a little confusing. Both Control and Spider-Man are getting new updates that take advantage of the PlayStation 5, but they'll come at a cost. For more on that though, check out Maddie's video from last week where he takes a deep dive into the Spider-Man remastered situation. So, despite all the changes in gaming, what games are going to be available on disc at launch? Before we go over these, I tried to set a specific criteria due to the muddied situation I just mentioned. I'm specifically looking at games in a PS5 case on launch day. Of course, there will be other PS5 games you can play on launch day, whether it's upgrade or digital, but I want to look at the retail experience that we've traditionally looked at for previous consoles. The third-party games that will be on the shelves on launch day will be Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, NBA 2K21, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and Godfall. As far as first and second party, there's Spider-Man Miles Morales, Sackboy: A Big Adventure, Destruction All-Stars, and Demon's Souls. So as far as I can tell, there will be 8 games in PS5 specific boxes on launch day. Surprisingly, this information isn't readily available other than from gathering it via stores like Amazon, Target, and Best Buy's website. And before you comment, there are more games coming in PS5 specific packaging just after launch. For example, Watch Dogs Legion's PS4 to PS5 upgrade will be available on the PS5's launch date, but as far as I can tell, the boxed version won't be available until November 17th. There's also a few games that I just really can't tell what's going on. Maneater on GameStop's website shows it in a PS5 box, but I can't find any other stores with this listing. So maybe it's a mock-up and they're selling the PS4 version and listing it as a PS5 game since it's getting an upgrade. Who knows? So you may be thinking, what's the point of comparing retail launch games of these two consoles when the way we buy games has changed completely? And that's the exact point. In the era of digital games, live service games, subscriptions, and upgrades, the idea of a launch lineup has completely changed. So while despite there being 6 less launch games at the store, there's going to be a huge amount of new content to explore on day one, just not necessarily the same way that it was in the past. Is the total amount of next-gen only games lacking still? Of course. I would have loved to see more PS5 only games. I can understand Sony being hesitant though, to not want to leave cash on the table with the huge amount of PlayStation 4s on the market. At the same time, you would think that they would want to give people specific games to justify the purchase of a PS5. In the end though, the lack of PS5 specific games doesn't seem to be hurting them at the moment at all. Anytime pre-orders go up, they're instantly snatched up. So what do you think? Is the lineup of PlayStation 5 games better or worse than PS4's initial launch? Let me know down in the comments what you think. Also, subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you don't miss any future episodes of SideQuest. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see you later.